Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to this. Welcome to another episode of Mission Driven You, a podcast for people who want to do good and do well in the world. And speaking of doing well, I've got a really interesting guest today. Her name is Stacie Shifflett. Stacie's an entrepreneur. She's a writer. She is a student of life. She's somebody with a really important story to tell about what it's like to really come into hard things and find the strength to keep going. So Stacie, welcome to the podcast. We're so excited you're here.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here with you today.
It's great. So we always ask every guest one question. It's the first question we always ask at the start of the podcast, which is, tell us the story of somebody or some group that made a difference for you. When you look back on your journey, you're like, you can't even imagine being here without them.
The only way I can answer that question, someone asked me a few years ago, oh gosh, it's probably been nearly a decade ago at this point. It was one of the earlier questions on my personal development journey, right? Who was most influential in my life and my hero? And I gotta have to say my mom.
Yeah.
I mean, I really am just gonna have to say that. And it's interesting because she taught me everything to be. She also taught me everything not to be. And that was both in the form of teaching, right, between right and wrong and so on and so forth, but also just in some of her behaviors, to be honest, right? Mm-hmm. There were things that were like, yeah, I really don't want to be that, right? So I would really have to say her. I had a great upbringing. We had some tumultuous times at times because I'm very independent, and I think she would use the word stubborn. But I kind of had to do things my way, and I had to figure everything out on my own. And I didn't realize until the last few years that what that really was a very strong value of self-actualization. And I've had that since I've been little. My parents tolerated it very well. They supported me through everything, even things that perhaps they, were not so happy about, but they continued to support me. So I really would have to say that she had the most influence in my life.
I love that. And thanks for sharing that story. Stubbornness, I suppose, is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it?
It really is. Yes.
Yeah.
It's perception.
Mm-hmm. So let's get into your story, because your story is one of really running into some really tough roadblocks and finding the strength to keep going and move forward and really begin the process of going through serious transformation in your life. So let's just start broadly. Tell us your story.
Gosh, as I said, I started out pretty independent at an early age. I went to work at 16. I was from a very middle-class family. We did fine. We weren't lacking for anything. A very traditional sort of Christian upbringing, a lot of values. They were not really wanting me to go to work, right? I just sort of came home and surprised them and said, I've got a job and I need you to sign this piece of paper for me so that I could go to work. The other thing, still at an early age, I'd say 17. That was at 16, and 17 is a pretty early age. And the principal called my mom one day, right? I got home and she's like, I got a call from the principal's office today. And I said, you did? And she said, yeah. He said you came in his office and said you wanted to graduate this year, a year early, or you were going to quit school, because I hated high school. I just hated it. I graduated a year early. I had all my credits. And so, that's just kind of been my path, right? I seem to re-architect and recreate my life about every 10 years. If I go back and look at a pattern, that seems to be about the time frame. So, I did go to college, but I was in the hospitality industry, which is a really nice way of saying I was, cocktail waitressing, waiting tables, bartending, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
I was making pretty good money, I thought, and I was doing okay, and I quit school, so I didn't graduate from college, and I did well and I was in that industry for about 10 years. And even again, at that very early age, I can remember walking into a bar and asking to speak to the owner. And I might have been 21, probably just barely old enough really to be in there and order a drink. And he came in and sat down, and I said, you're leaving money on the table. I can help you make more money here. I had been up in DC. This was in rural Virginia. And he's like, well, what do you mean? And I explained what I would do to change how he was doing the operations, and that it was a restaurant and a bar. And he hired me, and we did. We made, we increased his revenue. So pretty bold and pretty brazen. And I think that the confidence I have had all these years really, really supported me to do a lot of things. From there, gosh, what did I do? I think one of the things we're talking about is reinvention. I got married and decided I probably shouldn't be working nights and weekends in a restaurant. So I found a job with the help of my mom for a small woman-owned government contractor up at the DC area. And she was a very small company. I started doing a little bit of bookkeeping and some word processing, and she kept losing staff, and I just kept stepping up. So I probably was in that position for less than a year. And what I ended up doing, and I'm going to date myself here big time, but I actually rolled out and implemented all of the first IBM PC XTs, right? If you had a 10 megabyte hard drive, man, you had something throughout the entire Department of Health and Human Services. I created all the training. I delivered all the training. And that was within a year. So that's that's an area of the technology I always just say I took to it like a duck to water. And I was in technology for many, many years.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And yeah, if you're listening and you have no idea what a PCXT is, good for you. because you and I were probably doing some of the same things around the same time, maybe, within a decade of each other. And man, getting those things connected and running. And I just remember from my early days in the IT industry, just how difficult those were. Crazy.
We had MS-DOS, right? Lotus 123, WordPerfect, I think it was. And one of the things that was so interesting, and I was very young and didn't even really realize I was doing change management, right? I was helping people. I did change management many years after that and did very well with that. But one of the most interesting things to me was the women, right? Because a lot of the women at that time frame, and that would probably be like, maybe 1984-ish, 1984, 1985, somewhere in there, right? A lot of the women in the managerial positions within the department, they had worked their way up from secretarial pools and clerical workers, right? Administrative assistants and so on and so forth. So to them, I've just always been keen on observing humanity and noticing things, I guess. To them, it was taking a step backward to ask them to sit at a keyboard and do something. And there was a tremendous amount of resistance, which is so difficult to imagine these days, right? Because they opened so many job opportunities and just so many things to us in general, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And the idea, of course, we imagine now even the Elon Musks and the Tim Cooks of the world sitting behind their laptops. But there was a time very much when this feeling of being tethered to a keyboard sort of indicated a lower level of work. So you were able to go through the creation of a career that worked for you. But then you came to a place where your marriage started to fall apart and some things started happening in your life. Take us through that time.
Yeah, I've had a couple of really difficult experiences. I mean, I dealt with my mother's dementia, Alzheimer, and her demise, and assisting my dad through his death before her. But those things are sort of a natural order, right? The first major thing that happened to me was my first son died, and he never made it home. He never made it home from the hospital. So everything was normal with the pregnancy until I was bopping down the stairs one evening at about 7 months pregnant, and then it wasn't, right? And so they wouldn't take me at the hospital I was supposed to deliver at, because then I was high risk and they didn't want high risk. So I had a new doctor, new hospital, all of the above. And he had some birth defects, and he died. He was in the NICU. It was very, very small. And he ended up needing open heart surgery. And, I think if you've ever, when you lose a child, that is one of the worst things imaginable for a parent, right? I liken it as I literally went to hell. I did emerge, and I'm happy to share with you how I did that as well, because it might help somebody. But the doctors didn't prepare me for any of that, right? They said the outcomes would be fine. He'd be playing football in high school, and all of this. So I'm a fairly optimistic person anyway, but so I was really met with it as quite a shock. So that was the first thing. And at those times, I mean, I can remember being home. Of course, I stayed home from work and so on and so forth. I didn't really venture back out into society for a little bit. And I would just dread when the doorbell rang or somebody was going to drop flowers off, or, whatever. I just really didn't want to do any of that. And my husband at the time, my ex-husband now, of course, helped through that. He was supportive. My parents were both there. They came and stayed with us during that time. But one of my doctors recommended to go to a grief counseling group. Okay, that's fine. I'll go. So I went once. And the most interesting thing to me while I was there, and it was a fairly large group of parents, and they had lost children from every imaginable way at different ages. I mean, from someone being murdered to a birth defect like my child to SIDS, or, what have you. And I remember one of the dads in there, and he spoke up and said, and I just remember it so clearly, it had been 5 years since the death of their child, and his wife could still not leave the house to go to the grocery store. And I've got goosebumps even telling you that. And I sat there and I thought, I can appreciate that, certainly. And I have a lot of compassion for that. And we're all on our own journey. I'm not criticizing in any way, but I sat there and said, I can't do that. I can't stay in this place the rest of my life. And so that was a major turning point for me in recovering from that. And oddly enough, when my marriage imploded after 28 years of marriage, that's what kept me going. Because I told myself, if I could survive that and come out of it stronger and better and healthier. I think I mentioned to you before the show, I've got a beautiful son, right? I went on and got pregnant about 10 months after that, and, had a very healthy baby boy who's an adult now. I'm going to dinner with him after the show.
There you go.
But that was my mantra, right? I was like, okay, if I can, that surely has to be worse than this. But I'll have to tell you, my divorce knocked me completely down to my knees. It wasn't, I wasn't expecting to not have the certainty would probably be the good word, a good word for that, of, my future, right? I figured we would do things at people do. They retire, they travel, they, they what have,
Take
they
up
do
golf.
all these different things.
Sure.
Yeah. And, it didn't occur to me that in my 50s, I would end up alone without, with what I thought was going to be my future was not my future. And it really set me back quite a bit. And I did everything that I thought I should be doing. I had a business at the time as well. I had a construction company. I've done all kinds of things. I built 4 and 5 story apartment buildings in DC. Who does that? I don't know how to do that. I was a carpentry framer, but the company, I had a great guy running the company for me because I don't know how to build an apartment building, but just one of the best people ever. So I thought I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing. And, I just really realized that I didn't have a plan. I had adopted some habits that weren't so healthy. And I was just kind of floating like a leaf down a stream thinking, no, something will appear, right? I'll either meet somebody or, the job's going well. I mean, I did some travel. I did, I did a lot of things, but I wasn't happy. And I really realized that I had to create that myself. It wasn't just going to organically evolve. It wasn't going to just happen. It wasn't going to happen without being intentional about it. And that is really what set me off on a journey of over a decade now for really intense personal development. And I'm so grateful to Chris that was running my construction company that I've since closed at the time, and the team that I had on the ground there, and the company. It made good money. And I was able to take off and had the flexibility to really throw myself into my personal development. And that's what I did.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I want to get into what you do now, which is your company, Modern Consciousness. I want to talk about that and unpack some of the ideas and the work you get to do now, which seems to range from neuroscience to spirituality to energy and all that. But I'm curious, the start of your journey was a journey of self-reliance. I mean, it's probably why you and I connected so well, because yeah, man, I got my first above the board job when I was 16. But you had this real strong journey of self-reliance, but then you got enmeshed with other people, and then some things happened that were outside of your control. So I'm wondering, I want you to take us inside your inner journey at that period of time. Not what does your inner journey look like today, 10 years later, but at that time, what was happening internally, and how did you find the strength to begin to piece your life back together?
After the divorce?
Yeah.
Is that specific? Well, I was pissed, if I could say that.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. We use all kinds of language on this program.
I was really an angry woman. What is that? What is that saying? Hell hath no fury like a
woman scorned. Yeah,
something,
exactly.
right?
That was Shakespeare.
And I mean,
yeah.
I made the decision, right? I said, no, I'm not living like this. I'm just not doing it. And, it was met with, well, okay. And I'm like, we've been married for 28 years. Are we not going to talk about this? Because, I would have. I had tried the year prior. And, I had a llama farm at the time, and I actually will never forget, because we were walking through the gate when we were having this conversation, and he looked at me and he said, I haven't talked to you in 28 years. Why would I talk to you now? And I said, okay, wow. All right. That hurt a lot. I said, that's it. Get out. Just leave. So, I was really angry. It was not, the big stuff was very easy for us, splitting I did very well for myself. I mean, we had mentioned to your guests, I did an acquisition of a $50 million software company without investing a penny, which is, kind of unusual.
Right.
So we both had done very well professionally. So the asset division wasn't really that big of a deal. Stuff was split and off we went. But, the heartache and the hurt and, that was very, very difficult to get over. So, I did what I thought I needed to do. A home is very important to me. So the first thing I did was, look for a home and buy myself a home. And the job was going well, and I was fortunate to. The year prior to that, things were a little rocky, and I had developed a set of friendships that really carried me through that period as well. But I just wasn't happy, right? I wasn't fulfilled, and I couldn't see a future. I couldn't see an outcome for myself. And I think that's probably what really cemented it for me. And quite frankly, I just mentioned this to a divorce group the other day, and when I got tired of being angry, it's not good for your health, your emotional body, your physical body, your mental body. It's just not a good place to be. It has a purpose. It can ignite us to move and do things. So it has a very good purpose, right? But to stay stuck there is not good. And I got tired of being angry. And I remember walking into the office of someone that was recommended to me, who was a personal development coach, and she did some energetic healing work and some of that stuff. And when she said, "Why are you here?" I said, "Because I'm tired of being angry. I don't want to go through the rest of my life with that anger, just like I didn't want to go through the rest of my life buried in grief."
Right.
Years earlier from the death of my son. So, but I had to have that realization to move on.
That's powerful. And you moved on to what you speak of as modern consciousness. So I'd love for you to now start to unpack, let's just broadly, what is modern consciousness? When you use that term, what do you mean?
Well, it's such a strange thing, because all of this was gifted to me through meditation. I mean, I adopted meditation. I studied with a lot of people, and I did a lot of things, and did a lot of reading, a lot of study. And through this process, I opened up. I don't even want to say that it opened up. I connected with, right, the ability to communicate, either with the depths of my soul, my higher self, the universe, whatever you want to call it. And so this concept of modern consciousness was gifted to me. It came through to me very powerfully through meditation, and the different stages and phases and the names of it, and all of this stuff. And it really is a transformative philosophy that blends science and spirituality, to really empower people to live their lives intentionally, that are in full alignment with their core values and with their deepest desires. Because what I find in working with people is, when those are out of alignment, when you're compromising on your core values, or you're compromising on something that you really need in your life, and you're not receiving it, then that's what creates the anxiety and the unhappiness, and all of that. So that's what modern consciousness is. And it's funny, because I kept saying, the idea came in, and, I'm writing and I'm getting stuff, and it's really cool. What do you mean there's an automaton 2.0? What is that? Right. And I can explain all those to you briefly, but I resisted it for a while, like a couple of years at least, but it just wouldn't leave me alone. It really consumed my thought, and it does today as well. So I just kept ignoring it. I'm like, I am not your girl. I am, I'm 60. Oh gosh, I'm 66 now, but I was probably 62, 63 when all this started happening. And I'm like, no, I should be retiring. I don't want to start another business, all this stuff. And it just wouldn't leave me alone. So I finally was like, okay, all right, you're not going to leave me alone. So tell me what to do. What am I supposed to do? And I got one word in a meditation, which was to write. I said, okay, you've told me that before, but, and I had been writing, but it was private. So I surrendered to it. And that was the difference. I said, okay, I will write. and I surrender. You're not going to leave me alone. So this is a mission that's been granted to me, and I've got to pick up the baton and go with it. Right. And within 2 hours, maybe, I had a text message from a friend of mine that said, I've got a friend that's a publisher in Canada. She's doing an anthology book with Les Brown. She has a spot open in the book. Would you like to join the project? Yeah. So I said yes. I was like, no, I can't say no, right? I've got to say yes. So that's when I really put together and starting to write that chapter. And that chapter is called The End of Me. And it really is, I released some of my divorce in that story, right? That was the divorce story that had been in me. And obviously it's not the end of me because I'm still here. And my power quote in that book was, sometimes the right thing to do is the hardest. And I have shared that advice with many people because it is true. So I realized, okay, I can start a company with the launch of this book. And that's what I did. And, I went out and who does this? I got my URL, right? modernconsciousness.com. Right. It was like, well, I don't want that long extension for emails, So I went out and I'm like, what could I do for my email addresses? And said, go get the URL aware.life. So, that's me, aware.life. So it's just been an amazing sequence of events. And I'm stepping into it more and more and gaining more and more clarity. And then, my goal is to help people elevate their lives. And that's the name of my signature coaching program.
That's fabulous. And yeah, I can imagine after a lifetime of alpaca farming, M&A software activity and building apartments in DC, when the universe says, I really would like you to do this thing, there was probably some real sense of negotiation, or you probably had to do a little bit of surrender, didn't you?
Well, I did, because I kept saying, I don't know how to do this, right? This is a completely different business model, and I don't know how to do it. And it's been interesting for me because I've always been so confident all my life. And I think the divorce really wrecked some of my confidence. I didn't really realize that for a while, right? But I had to sit back down and process and heal that, as well as, remind myself that, I'm self-taught. I've taught myself everything. It's not that I didn't have good mentors or, people show me things along the way, but, I literally am self-taught. I basically sat down with computers and, learned about them. And, so I'm like, okay, you didn't know how to do anything else before you did it. So what's different about this? And I think what was different about it was my age, right? I think it was, so there's a lot of beliefs and you're familiar with the concept, and we just don't realize we adopt all this stuff. And the healing process is so interesting, and working with your beliefs is so interesting, because we'll think we have something covered or we've healed it. Daggone that universe, right? It's like there's always nuances and there's always a deeper level to go to. And it's always challenging us to rise, right? And to expand. We feel like we might be getting being beaten down, but we're not. We're actually being encouraged to step into it and expand. And that's where we learn and gain and learn and gain.
Yeah.
Is through those experiences, if we allow ourselves.
Yeah. Now, somebody comes to you and they're dealing with a particular issue, and your model really spans several different modalities or different ideas: energy, science, neuroscience, spirituality. How do you know where to start with a person? And for somebody listening, they're like, I'm struggling with something, I can't quite get my hands around it. Like, what is your advice for understanding where to start?
Well, it's a formula that I apply to everybody through my Elevate Your Life program. Now, the outcomes are different, the experience is different, but it's the same formula, and it's unique to each individual because we all are unique individuals. So, as I mentioned before, when we're really out of alignment, I've found that a lot of our dis-ease comes from being out of alignment with our values and our real needs, right? Our deepest needs. We don't even know what those are. We're not taught that. We just really don't even know what those are. The other thing that I find really interesting is that we routinely evaluate so many areas of our lives, our businesses, our bank balances, what our weight is on the scale, the kids' grades in school, what our promotion, whatever, we measure and we monitor all of these things, but we do them all separately. It's all stovepiped. We don't ever sit and have an integrated look at our entire life. So the Ascension formula that I developed really is, first of all, doing a complete assessment of your life, every aspect of your life, right? Yeah. So I look at all the different life domains. I guide them through the process, right, of looking at all their different life domains and sort of figuring out, you have to know, for any journey, you have to know your starting point, right? Sure. And I like to go deep, and I'm also a very practical person. I'm really good at creating order out of chaos. I'm very good at creating practical strategies, something that's doable and achievable, that then spurs you, right? It reinforces what you're doing, and then you keep doing it. It's not necessarily a one-time process. So I believe that it's really key to gain clarity on the current state of all the areas of your life, because I find that even though we might be struggling with something in one area, it's in other areas. It just masks itself. It looks different. It's the same theme. We just don't really realize it. So, that's the first thing we do. And then the second thing is to look at all of those life domains again and say, okay, what's going to make you happy? What do you aspire to in this area? And, when you ask people their aspirations and what, they might be able to pick out a work goal or what have you, but for the holistic approach, it's a very difficult question to answer. People usually don't have the answer. So then we architect a bridge between, okay, here's where you're at, and here's really where you want to be. And that's really where the magic starts to happen, because we really start to acknowledge the gaps, develop a plan, right? And themes start to, that's where the themes in your life start to show up. Yeah. And then, there's a couple more processes in there of activating it where, we really take some practical steps, and then we fully align it in your life so that how you can live daily to do that. And, while I encourage people to choose a big thing, it's really more the small things, right? Let's start here where we can actually gain some traction and get some forward momentum going, because, Tony Robbins always says, it's a 2 millimeter rule. And I think, what's the airline pilots have a rule. I can't think of what it's called right now, but if you're like 1 degree off course, by the time you reach a destination, if let's say you're doing a transatlantic flight, you are way off course. So just those small shifts help a lot. And a lot of what I teach and work with people on is raising your awareness, right? So it's really catching ourselves. And, it's so cool when then you go, oh, look at me, I caught that, right? I was like, sure. I got it. So it's a growth process, and it's very exciting. And it's very exciting to see people expand and smile. Sometimes it's not so pleasant because stuff comes up and we have to process that, but that's fine. Get it out, right? Better out than in. Let's get it out. Let's put a different perspective on it. Let's honor it. Yeah. I went through a divorce. I should be hurt, right? I was very, very hurt by it. And that's fine. Let's honor that. But then let's move on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, the thing you're talking about, the 2 millimeter difference or the small degree of difference, there's a great it's actually on YouTube, but the lecture was given long before YouTube existed. It's a lecture of Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, and he talks about, the fact that if you leave from LA on a plane heading to New York and you're 2 degrees off, you'll end up in Newfoundland. And so it can make really significant difference.
It does, and we tend to think of big things, right?
Yeah,
and it's really the little daily things that matter in your daily life.
Yeah.
So that's really what I like to focus on with people. We get to the big stuff too, but it's the daily stuff, right? That's where your joy comes from. That's where your peace, and we don't want it to be fleeting. People have done everything they thought they're supposed to do. They've achieved the job, they've got the house, the income, the job, whatever, but they find that the moments of happiness are fleeting. And, since I was a little girl, I can remember my mom saying, how do you get into heaven? And I'm like, you just have to have peace of mind. It's all about peace of mind, Mama. As long as I have peace of mind, I'm good. And I'd be 5 years old standing there telling her that. And she's like, but, it's funny because here I am now at 66.
Right.
And something that I seem to inherently know from a very early age has really evolved to be a big truth for me, right? It really is about being at peace in your heart.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lesson in there about age too. I know in my own story was having to kind of reboot my life in my 50s. And, if you want to be discouraged as a later life rebooter, whether you're an entrepreneur or just trying to figure out how to get your life together, go and search older people who reinvented themselves, and you'll get a bunch of 30-year-olds and Colonel Sanders, the inventor of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Like there's surely there's more of us who have had later life success, but really had to reach in and find something deep within us. I guess going back to Viktor Frankl, do you feel like some of the struggles you've had? I mean, you've mentioned it a little bit. One of the things he said gives us meaning is when we have a redemptive perspective on our suffering. Do you feel like there's some value in sort of learning to redeem even the hard things you've gone through?
Well, there's polarity in everything, right? We don't know the good without the bad. We don't know the happy without the sad. So I think, I like to call my life one that is rich with experience, and I do have a wealth of experience and many, many good things. And I've had some very difficult things as well. And I think that, so ability to cope is one thing that's coming to mind. I think that we have to, I think we fare better if we develop those skills, coping and I can't. What's the big buzzword about all of that right now? I can't think of the word right now. It's not coming.
I don't know. Do you mean like growth mindset, something like that, or
resilience? Resilience.
Sure.
That's
Resilience.
that's the word. And I think that we do need to. I think that we fare better when we develop some resilience.
Right.
But I think one of the big things for me too is really the realization that everybody is on their own journey. We're all here to learn whatever it is we're to learn. And it doesn't look one way for everybody, right? There's so many different ways. So I think that when we have a life that is rich in experience that we have evolved through, not been buried under, evolved through, it really opens up compassion and understanding. And I think that having compassion for others and respect for their journeys is key. I think it's key. I haven't joked with him. I don't talk to him anymore. But, I've gotten to the place with my ex-husband. It's like, I know at this point, and believe me, I was very, very devastated for a while, for years. At this point, I have and it's been a few years. I've certainly have come to the appreciation that he is on his journey, right? It's and we had, I can remember my mom saying, oh, I don't know, how did you stay married 28 years? And I said, Mama, I am not going to discount 28 years of my life, because there was a lot of good things in those 28 years. There really, really were. There was a lot. And, some not so much. And, I've learned through those experiences. But, I know when we get to the other side, it's going to be kind of I can just see him standing there, kind of a sheepish grin on his face going, hey, sorry about that. But, we kind of had this soul agreement before we ever be like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And that's where, that's where forgiveness comes in. I feel compelled. I usually meditate a little bit before an episode. We don't talk. We're better off not talking. I have no desire to. So forgiveness isn't about that, right? It's really just accepting and letting go and getting beyond it and appreciating their journey as well as your journey, and just letting it go, right? And honestly, I have no doubt that's the conversation we'll have when we get to the other side.
I love it. Well, Stacie Shifflett, this has been a really, really beautiful, rich conversation. Thank you. If people want to find out more about what you do, how do they get a hold of you? How do they find you in the world?
Yeah, well, you can email me at empower@aware.life, and the website is modernconsciousness.com. All of my social media, either Instagram or Facebook, is Modern Consciousness, so you can find me there. And if you get on my website, I always forget to tell people this, but I do have a free ebook that's called 2 Keys to Increase Happiness and Peace of Mind. And in that, it's a little bit science, and then it's a little bit some of my experience and behavioral stuff. But I share with you 2 things that really helped me open my awareness, and some of the basic foundations of creating happiness and joy in your life and peace of mind. So that's free for the taking. It's on my website, and you can find it. You can find it when you get in there.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask you one last question. This is a question I've been using lately. Imagine that the most powerful people in the world are listening to this podcast. Maybe it's the heads of the movie studios. Maybe it's the leaders of the free world, whoever. And they hear your story. They hear this, they understand this idea about modern consciousness, and they really take it to heart. Now, I want you to imagine 20 years from now, how could the world be changed by people taking to heart the things that you've been advocating for the last 45 minutes?
Well, that's the piece. I haven't figured out what I call the big modern consciousness yet, because I really do plan to impact the world somehow. And I think it is through education. I think it's through education and practice and having good examples. I think until people, I think the impact would be getting them out of their comfort zone and to realize that there are many, many different perspectives in this world, and there aren't necessarily a right answer. We have to accept other people. We have to compromise, not on our core values, right? Not on the things that are really, really meaningful to us. But we have to compromise it as a society in particular. We have a lot of different cultures. There's a lot of different beliefs. And in that regard, we are, as a society, going to have to compromise on some things that we may prefer not to, but we have to understand that some people may need those choices, but that doesn't preclude us from making our choice. But some people may need those choices available to them. And you don't understand that. It's difficult to understand if we haven't. It's an old adage, right? Unless we've walked in somebody else's shoes, right? But I think that's where the compassion comes in. And I think that's what I'd like to see. Expanding the education, the compassion, and our willingness to not be so steadfast in our beliefs. because they may not be the right beliefs, right?
Stacie Shifflett, thank you. This was wonderful. I love that vision, and I hope it comes true in the world. Thanks for being with us today.
Oh, thank you. I hope it comes true too. I hope I'm part of it.